Hello and welcome to this course in educational psychology. My name is Dr. Neil Soggie and I will be your facilitator for this course. This course is about transforming the lives of students by understanding how their mind works and how to be able to meet their needs. Within this module, Module 1, we will be speaking of teaching and educational psychology. I do encourage you to spend a little bit of time going over the course expectations this week and start to plan out how you will meet the course expectations throughout the course. Now, you're probably taking this course because you want to be a teacher, or you're at least interested in exploring that, or you're interested in helping other people in some other kind of human service activity. So why be a teacher? The short answer is easy. To witness the diversity of growth in young people and their joy in learning. To encourage lifelong learning, both for yourself and for others. To experience the challenge of devising and doing interesting, exciting activities for the young. There is, of course, more than this to be said about the value of teaching. Now, consider, for instance, the young people referred to. When you think about teaching, in one class, they could be 6 years old. In another, they could be 16 or even older. Maybe you're interested in teaching adults. They could be rich, they could be poor, or somewhere in between. They could come from any ethnic background. Their first language could be almost anything. Perhaps they speak several languages at home. There are all sorts of possibilities. But whoever the particular students are, they will have potential as human beings. They will have talents and personal qualities and passions and interests, oftentimes not yet realized. And part of the joy of being a teacher is to help them discover how they can contribute to society, how they can become a leader, how they can become an expert in a field, how they can support each other. A teacher's job is, in fact, a teacher's privilege. It is to help people to realize their potential. Teachers often reflect upon their experiences and how they have learned to inspire others. Here's one story. Nathan paused for a deep breath before speaking to me. "It's not like I expected it to be," he said. "I've got 5 kids who speak English as a second language. I didn't expect that. I've got 2, maybe 3 with reading disabilities, and one of them has a part-time aide. I've had to learn more about using computers than I've ever expected that I would have to. There are a lot of curriculum materials online now, and the computers help the kids that need more practice or who finish activities early. I'm doing more screening and testing of kids than I expected to. And it all takes time away from what I feel teaching is." And that's not a surprise. But there are opportunities to light a fire under kids, to inspire them to learn to read, to inspire them to discover the joys of being lifelong learners. A teacher is one who is able to lay the groundwork for lifelong learning. You will not teach any one student forever, of course, but you will be able to work with them long enough to convey a crucial message. That there is much in life to learn. More, in fact, that any one teacher can convey. More, in fact, that any one school can convey. And that part of living life is learning how to learn. The knowledge that they are seeking may be in science or math or learning to read or skills in sports or music and art or almost anything. Whatever you teach, its immensity can be a source of curiosity, a source of wonder and excitement. It can be a reason to be optimistic about life in general and about your students in particular. Learning, when properly understood, is a never-ending process, even though it often focuses on short-term immediate goals and concerns. As a teacher, you have an advantage not shared by most people in society. Namely, you have the opportunity to teach valuable knowledge and skills. And to point students beyond what they learn from you. There are plenty of things in this world to learn, and we can discover the joy of that learning process, and we can share that joy with other people. Whatever you teach, you will be able to feel the satisfaction of designing and orchestrating complex activities that communicate new ideas and skills. The challenge is to be creative, to exercise your judgment and your artistry in being free to convey this information. Your students depend upon you more than you know. Your students will depend upon your skill in planning, in management, in your being able to manage your own emotions and convey positive emotions to your students. Teachers will need to know how to explain ideas clearly, to present new materials in a sensible sequence and at an appropriate pace, to point out connections between their new learning and their prior experiences. Although these skills really take a lifetime to master, so don't feel bad if you're struggling to start off with. Just remember that you can practice being a successful teacher early in your career, and that you will need to work at steadily improving your teaching over time. Right from the start, though, it's important to focus upon design, communication, and curriculum, and to enjoy the major perks of the job. You see, the very complexity of the classroom virtually guarantees that teaching is never going to be boring. There is something new and exciting awaiting you in the classroom each and every day. A student shows an insight that you never expected to see, or fails to show one when you were sure that the student would. An activity goes better than you expected, or worse, or oftentimes just different from what you expected. And you need to learn to roll with those surprises because they're wonderful and they're part of the fun that comes from the complexity of teaching. There is novelty in the occupation of teaching. It is a calling. It is something that you can be and live and allow to enrich your life. Now, having said that, there are also challenges. Every joy of teaching has a possible frustration related to it. You may wish to make a positive difference in students' lives, but sometimes you don't see it or don't see it right away, and you only discover the positive that you influence the child with decades later. But there's still joy there. A student seems sometimes to not learn very much, or to be unmotivated, or to be unfriendly, or whatever. And you need to learn the skill of being positive, of being supportive, of being focused, even when everything seems to be going against you. Some teaching problems can be subtle. Some are immense and will challenge your knowledge. You might accidentally discourage a student by implying that the student can never learn enough. The complexity of designing and implementing instruction can sometimes seem overwhelming. Maybe it just feels unsatisfying and mundane at times. Unexpected events in the classroom can feel like chaos instead of an attractive novelty. But as people say, bad things happen in life. And so bad things are going to happen to good teachers. But as with the rest of life, the bad things of teaching do not negate the value of the good. If anything, these surprises, these undesired events, make the good desired ones even more satisfying and render the work of your teaching all the more valuable. As we explore this course, I hope you discover that despite the reality that bad things can happen, that life can go well with teaching, and that there is a joy in this process. Now, teaching today is very different than it has been in the past. In fact, over the past few decades, teaching has changed significantly, so much so that if you've been out of education for a while and you go into a school, you might not recognize the structures that are in place. The changes have influenced teaching in a lot of ways. Now, one of the ways that teaching has changed is the increased diversity that is being seen across the spectrum. There is more differences among students than has been traditionally the case. But diversity has made teaching more fulfilling as a career. But it also makes it more challenging in certain respects. There is an increased expectation for technology within instruction. Classrooms, schools, students use computers more today. Mobile computing is simply a part of life. Mobile communication is a part of life. It's part of research and writing and keeping records. Technology has created new ways for students to learn. It's also altered how teachers can teach more effectively, and even raised issues that constitute what is true teaching and learning. Technology does not need to be the enemy. Technology is here to stay. It's important to embrace that technology. Greater accountability within education is also something that is becoming to the fore. Public expectations are that teachers will be a gatekeeper for worldviews. So you need to be very careful about your public presence. You need to pay attention to how you teach, the quality of your teaching, but also how you convey yourself on your Facebook page or on any public communication. Because people are there looking at you and looking for you to act as a standard bearer for public life. And this can create some constraints for teachers that teach and for students that learn. But it's part of the reality that we need to deal with. There's also increased professionalism of teachers. Now more than ever, teachers are able to assess the quality of their own work as well as that of their colleagues and to take steps to improve it when necessary. Professionalism improves teaching. Documentation supports professionalism. So there is documentation that is part of teaching. But by creating higher standards of practice, it also creates greater worries about whether particular teachers in schools are good enough. And this can cause an extra stress. So it's important to be able to commit yourself and focus upon the tasks of professionalism and recognize that there are challenges that come with that. Now, how these changes show up in the daily life in the classroom, well, that depends partly on where you teach, what you teach. The circumstances are going to differ between the schools or the cities or towns or villages that you work within. But there are some trends that I do want to highlight. So with the diversity of students have, of course, always been diverse. Whether in the past or the present day, students learn at unique paces. They show unique personalities, and they learn in their own ways. But in recent decades, though, the forms and extent of diversity seems to have increased, at least in some obvious ways. Now, more than ever, teachers are likely to serve students with diverse language backgrounds, diverse nationality backgrounds, to serve more individuals with special needs, and to teach students either younger or older than have traditionally been considered eligible for education in the past. As part of this language diversity, you need to keep in mind that there are continually new people coming in to the nation, and with that brings an extra level of complexity that needs to be considered. There's diversity in special education needs. A factor within classrooms is the inclusion of students with disabilities into the classroom with non-disabled peers. In the 1970s, was passed within individual provinces through to the 80s, laws that guarantee free, appropriate education for children with disabilities of any kind, whether the impairment is physical, cognitive, emotional, or behavioral. Laws also recognize that such students need special supports in order to learn or function effectively in a classroom with non-disabled peers. So they provide for special services, for example, teaching assistants, and procedures to make individualized education plans for students with disabilities. As a result of these changes, Canadian teachers are likely to have at least a few students with special education needs, even if they're not trained as special education teachers, or even if they have no prior personal experience with people with disabilities. It's simply a matter of reality. that people struggle with different things, and we need to meet the students where they are. Classroom teachers are also likely to work as a part of a professional team focusing on helping these students to learn as well as possible and to participate in the life of the school. The trend toward inclusion is definitely new compared to circumstances of generations past. But this is part of the joy and opportunity of teaching. And there is diversity in modern classrooms that are not limited to language or disabilities. And a recent change has been the broadening of the age range of students. And perhaps you're teaching someone that, or will be teaching someone that is 3 or 4, or someone that is older, and you're teaching in an adult education classroom. The obvious difference is that of maturity between the different age groups. So sometimes that calls for open-ended plans and open, flexible teaching strategies to teach either the younger or the older students. And we'll discuss some of the developmental issues later on in this course. Another end of the age spectrum is individuals taking courses into their later adulthood, extending beyond formal college or university. Adult education, as it's sometimes called, can often take place in the workplace. So perhaps you're going to be a corporate educator, where you're training people in a corporate setting. And that can be a wonderfully rewarding teaching experience. Teachers teaching adult students, though, have to adjust their instructional strategies and their relationships with students to enhance and to motivate their students to continue to learn. The students' maturity often means that they have had life experiences that enhance and motivate their learning. And that is something powerful that can be drawn upon with the teacher. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind with diversity. Another trend is the use of technology to support learning. For most teachers, technology means using computers and the internet as resources for teaching and learning. Now, these tools have significantly increased the amount and range of information available to students, even if their benefits have sometimes been exaggerated. With the internet, it is now relatively easy to access up-to-date information on practically any subject imaginable. You can get access to pictures and video clips and audio to accompany things, and it is a wonderful resource. Now, for a variety of reasons, however, technology has not always been integrated into teachers' practice very thoroughly. One reason is practical. In many societies and regions, classrooms contain only 1 or 2 computers at the most, and some have limited access to the internet. So you need to wait your turn. And so perhaps that's the challenge. But there is a greater and greater shift towards mobile computing. And when we can have all children having access to technology, then we can begin to expand communication globally, so we could perhaps set up connections with other schools, other classrooms around the world, and start to share ideas. And this can be incredibly enriching. But we need to keep in mind that there is the principle of justice. So we need to be able to provide this technology for all students. Whatever the case, technology also brings some challenges and even creates problems. It costs money to equip classrooms. Oftentimes, money is scarce. And this may therefore mean depriving students of other valuable resources like additional staff or books or supplies. Other challenges are less tangible. In using the internet, for example, students need help in sorting out trustworthy information or websites from the fluff websites that are unreliable or even damaging. Providing this help can sometimes be challenging even for experienced teachers. Some educational activities simply do not lend themselves to computerized learning, sports, for example, or driver education or choral practice. As a new teacher, therefore, you will need not only to assess what technologies are possible in your classroom, but also what will actually be assisted by new technologies. So you need to give some thought to making hard decisions about how technology affects how you teach and the ways you work with your students. There's also accountability in education. In recent years, the public and its leaders have increasingly expected teachers and students to be accountable for their work, meaning that schools and teachers are held responsible for implementing particular curricula and meeting specific goals, and that students are held responsible for learning particular knowledge. The trend toward accountability, more in the United States than in Canada, but it is influencing Canada, has increased the legal requirements for becoming and sometimes remaining certified as a teacher. Teachers are expected to engage in pre-service teaching on their subject area and education-related courses. And this is more so than in the past. There is expectation for continued professional development and peer support education. Public accountability has led to increased use of high-stakes testing in the United States, and that will inevitably influence Canada as well. High-stakes tests influence grades that students receive in courses or determine whether students graduate or continue to their next level of schooling. The tests are often a mixture of essays and structure response questions, such as multiple choice items. And they raise important issues about what teachers should teach or how they should teach and how teachers should help students to pass these examinations. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind when we are dealing with teaching. One thing to be sure of, you will always need to keep in the back of your mind that you need to show that you are worthy of being a teacher and that you will need to help your students to succeed. There's also an expectation for increased professionalism of teachers. Whatever your reaction to the previous trends, it is important to realize that they contribute to this fourth trend of greater professionalism of teachers. By most definitions, an occupation like being a lawyer, being a doctor, or in this case, being a teacher, is a profession if its members take responsibility for the quality of their work, hold each other accountable for its quality, and recognize and require special training in order to practice it. By this definition, teaching has definitely become more professional than in the past. Increased expectations of achievement by students mean that teachers have increased responsibility not only for their students' academic success, but also for their own development as teachers. Becoming a new teacher now requires more specialized work than in the past, as reflected in the increased requirements for certification or licensure in whatever region you're going to be working. The increased requirements are partly a response to the complexities created by the increasing diversity of students and increasing use of technology in the classrooms. Greater professionalism has also been encouraged by initiatives from educators themselves to study and improve their own practice. One way to do so, for example, is through something called action research, sometimes called teacher research, where you are researching what works and what doesn't work in a specific setting. Now, how can educational psychology help with all of this teaching? All things considered, then, times have changed for teachers, but teaching will always remain an attractive, satisfying, and worthwhile profession. These recent trends mean simply that you need to prepare for teaching differently than you might have in the past, or perhaps differently than your own school teachers did a generation ago. Fortunately, there are ways to do this. There are many current programs in teacher education that provide a balance of experience in tune with current and emerging needs of teachers. They offer more time for practice teaching in schools, for example, and teacher education instructors often make deliberate efforts to connect the concepts and ideas of education and psychology to current best practices of education. It's important, remember, because you're transforming the lives of students, to be able to understand the lives of students, to understand how their brain works, to understand their developmental level, to understand how their mind works and how their mind will change over time, how they process information. And educational psychology informs you in all of these areas. The ability of educational psychology is that it comments on particular problems, informs particular strategies, supports your everyday teaching, helps you to move your way through challenges, and how to help your student in a satisfactory way. And when you are successful in doing that, you experience the joy of teaching. So, in short, educational psychology is important because it makes you a better teacher. And when you are a better teacher, you enjoy teaching more. So, in essence, teaching is a great life. Teaching in the 21st century offers a number of gifts for you. You get to witness and assist the growth of young people. You get to help them discover the joys of lifelong learning. You get to be a lifelong learner yourself. You're able to challenge and engage in the excitement of designing effective instruction. You're able to witness beautiful diversity in students and learn from that diversity yourself, and watch other students learn from that diversity. You're able to spread instructional technology into the classroom and help your students discover the joy of that technology. You're able to increase expectations for accountability in education. That improves the quality and the trustworthiness of education within the public. So you're serving the public. And you're able to develop an increased professionalism among teachers. You're able to support your peers, and your peers are able to support you. And in so doing, you become the best version of yourself in your chosen career as a teacher. Each one of these trends is an opportunity for your students and for yourself. to transform your life, to help you to be the best teacher that you can be, to help your students to become learners, and to discover the joy that is learning as a part of life. And that ends our module for this week. You take care. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.